back in body, gone in soul. When a call from home shook a body long numb. That winter, I couldn't even remember the last time I picked up the phone to call home. I had forgotten my mother's voice, forgotten how old my little sister must be by now. I'd buried the idea of family somewhere along back alleys, under damp rooftops, and at the bottom of cheap bottles that burned my throat. I lived like a ghost. No name, no address. Each day a blurry copy of the last. No one called, and I didn't expect anyone to. I had accepted myself as a flaw, a son that never came home, a brother who no longer existed. That day, I was sitting under the awning of an old corner store, hands trembling with a half-eaten sandwich someone had tossed my way. Then I heard the phone ring. The old Puerto Rican woman who ran the place waved at me. "Hey, Chico, someone's calling for you." I froze. Couldn't be me. Nobody calls me anymore. But I walked over slowly toward the rusty, wall-mounted phone with its frayed spiral cord, lifted the receiver, pressed it against my ear like it might carry me back to a life I forgot how to belong to. And then I heard the voice. Shaky, young, familiar. "Victor, it's me. Dad's not going to make it." That was it. Just that one sentence. It didn't scream, didn't cry, but it landed like a quiet blade right through the ribs. I went still, not because my father was dying, but because my little sister still called me Victor. No anger, no accusation, just Victor, like I never left. I wanted to ask, "Why are you calling me? Do you hate me? Do you even know what I've become these past years?" But my throat locked. I just heard her breathing, and a faint voice in the background, my mother's, "Give me the phone, I want to speak to him." Then silence. The line cut. I stood there, the dead receiver still pressed to my ear. Only the wind through the door crackled now, and the stale scent of wet concrete filled the air. Suddenly, this body, this filthy, tired frame I dragged around for years, started to ache, because I, who thought I no longer had a mother, no longer deserved a sister, no longer had the right to be called son, was still being asked to come home, even if just to say goodbye. Nobody demanded anything of me. No guilt, no plea, just one sentence. "Victor, Dad's not going to make it." And somehow, that was the loudest thing I'd heard in years. It cracked open something I had sealed tight. A pit of guilt, a cliff of shame, and the deepest fear of all, that I would have to face the father I walked away from, while he was still waiting for a son who never came back. The first return a step heavier than years of escape. I can't remember exactly which bus brought me back to Ohio. I just know I boarded at dusk, carrying nothing but a frayed backpack with a worn-out shirt and some crumpled papers. Years ago, I left this place thinking I'd never return. When I stepped off the bus, I barely recognized what used to be home. The wooden house stood still among thinning trees. Everything looked smaller than I remembered. Or maybe I was just bigger with shame. I stood at the rusty gate, hands trembling. I didn't dare knock, didn't know what to say if someone answered. Only the wind tugging at my jacket, the scent of damp winter soil, and memories I didn't want to remember. I recalled the day I left, argued with my father, slammed the door, walked away. No goodbye to my mother. No word to my sister. I used to think, I'll come back when I've made it. I'll come back when I can hold my head high. But now, I was coming back with nothing but this worn-out body and years of silence. I walked slowly into the yard. My coat's torn hem dragged against the cracked tile. My shoes were caked in mud, dusted with city trash. And my hair, God knows when I last looked in a mirror, looked like someone who had been living under bridges. The door wasn't locked. I pushed it open gently. It creaked like a weary sigh. And there she was, my sister Clara, standing in the living room. She turned and froze. No one spoke at first. Only the ticking of the clock on the wall filled the room. Her eyes were red, her shoulders hunched from carrying more than a girl her age should. She looked at me like she wasn't sure if I was real. I wanted to say, "I'm sorry," but my mouth only moved. No sound came out. Then she walked toward me, not to hug, not to step away. Just gave a slight nod, like saying, "It's enough that you came." And I broke. Not out of pain, but because I didn't think I deserved to be forgiven so quietly. I glanced around the old house. The stove still sat in the corner, the small dining table by the window, and the faded family photo on the wall. In that photo, I stood next to Dad, Mom's arm around me, Clara in front. Our last photo together. I wasn't that person anymore. I didn't belong in that frame. But somehow, I was still here. A father who didn't blame me, just held my hand to say goodbye. The bedroom was still at the end of the hallway, just like I remembered. But standing in front of that half-open door, I felt like I was staring into a chasm. Inside was the man I once swore I'd never face again. I stood frozen, not because I feared him, but because I feared what he had become. The image of a once towering man, now reduced to fragility, was harder to look at than any scolding he ever gave me. I pushed the door open. A soft amber light spilled over the old wooden bed. He lay on his side, thin blanket draped across his chest, face hollow, eyes half shut, as if drifting in and out of sleep. One hand rested limply on his stomach. The other dangled over the edge, so frail the bones showed through like dry twigs. I stepped inside, slow and silent. Then, as if sensing something, he opened his eyes. They weren't the same eyes I remembered. Not sharp, not stern, just tired, and somehow still gentle. He looked at me for a moment, blinking. I wanted to kneel, to cry, to scream I was wrong. But my mouth was sealed shut by every year I had stayed away. Then he slowly lifted his hand and held mine. He didn't speak, just held my hand barely, like I might slip away again if he squeezed too hard. Then he said only one thing, "You're alive. That's enough." The words came out rough, like gravel, pulled from the bottom of his lungs. No anger, no resentment, no reminders of what I'd done. Just, "You're alive." And I broke. Tears I didn't know I could still cry fell. Not because of guilt, but because no one had ever forgiven me so kindly. As a child, I saw him as unyielding, the man who banned daydreaming, who demanded I be a man of real work, who once said, "Talent without ethics is a double-edged sword." I fought him, ran away, never looked back, and now at the end he was the one to reach for me first. I remember his eyes in that moment, looking past my filth, past my failure, as if searching for the boy he once believed in. Or maybe he never stopped believing. Maybe it was me who stopped believing I was worth it. Then he closed his eyes again, still holding my hand, lightly but firmly, like he was saying, "That's all I ever wanted." And that all felt like more than I ever deserved. When no one blames you, you blame yourself even more. My father's funeral took place on a cold winter morning. No drums, no crowd, just a few old neighbors and distant relatives I hadn't seen in years. I stood at the back row, wearing a coat my sister had lent me. No one recognized me. Some glanced my way, then turned. Their eyes passed over me like I was a stranger who just wandered in. And honestly, I preferred it that way, because if they knew who I was, I might not have been able to stand. They read a simple eulogy, spoke of my father as a diligent worker, a loyal neighbor, a strict but loving parent. I listened to every word like they were talking about someone I once knew, but left behind too long ago. How many doctor visits had I missed? How many nights had my mother carried him alone? How many times had they waited and I didn't come? Me, the boy who once said he'd bring honor to this family, wasn't even there when it mattered most. After the burial, people slowly left. I stayed behind, staring at the fresh mound of dirt, fists buried deep in my pockets to keep from shaking. Not from the cold, but from the ache of knowing I didn't belong here anymore. My mother walked over and gently placed a hand on my shoulder. She didn't say a word, just stood beside me, as if she understood that no judgment from her could compare to the sentence I was giving myself. That night, I lay curled up on the lower bunk I used to sleep in as a kid. The ceiling still had that pencil scratch I carved when I was 10. Victor Dominic, going far. Now, going far didn't sound like a dream. It felt like a crime. I didn't cry. Couldn't. My eyes were dry, my chest tight and solid like stone. I wanted to scream, to punch the walls, to shout into the dark, "Why didn't someone stop me? Why didn't anyone call me back sooner?" But deep down, I knew their silence was their forgiveness. And that kind of forgiveness, quiet, unconditional, was the hardest to accept. I lay there, surrounded by the echoes of a home I once belonged to, where I first learned to write, where I heard Dad's sewing machine and Mom singing lullabies. And it hit me. No matter where I went, how successful or broken I became, in this place, I was still the boy who ran away. And I was the one who chose not to return, even though the door had always been open. She was ill, yet calmer than the one who left. The next morning, I sat on the porch, holding a warm cup Clara had handed me. I didn't notice when my mother had woken up. She appeared quietly from the kitchen, wearing an old sweater, her hair silver and neatly tied back, just like always. She sat beside me without a word. We both stared out at the small garden, the same place I once learned to ride a bike, the same spot where Dad planted the first wooden post to build our chicken coop. I glanced sideways at her, smaller than I remembered, thinner. Her face was lined not by time, but by the weight of years she never complained about. "You're leaving soon, aren't you?" she asked softly. I nodded. She didn't protest, just gave a slow nod. then adjusted the edge of her scarf, like tidying up some lingering memory. "You don't have to say anything," she said. "Those who leave often find it hardest to return, but the ones who stay, we never forget." That line hit like a slap, not to wound, but to wake me up. I turned to her. "You're sick, aren't you?" I asked, voice cracking. She smiled gently. "Yes, doctor says early stage. It's okay. Cancer, isn't it?" She didn't respond right away, just looked me straight in the eye, then nodded soft as a sigh. Then added, "Still had to plan your father's funeral. Haven't had time to think about myself." I lowered my head, feeling myself collapse inside. All the times I'd been proud of being smart, successful, admired, and now faced with this fragile, weary woman who still held everything together, I felt useless. No one asked me to help. No one made demands. And maybe that's why I felt even more out of place. She stayed calm, while I, once the family's bright hope, just sat there, helpless, watching her hold up the sky alone. When she stood and walked back inside, I watched her disappear through the doorway. And I wondered, maybe some people are born to carry all the pain, just to keep a roof from collapsing. And if that's true, then maybe I hadn't been part of this roof for a very long time. She got into college, a pride I had no part in. That evening, I sat alone in the corner of the old kitchen. Clara walked in, holding a piece of paper, her hands trembling, but her eyes glowing. Mom was at the table, her scarf loosely wrapped, peeling an apple slowly. "I got in, Mom," Clara whispered, holding up the letter, her acceptance to Ohio State Medical School. I heard every word, but I didn't turn around. Mom smiled, that soft, quiet smile I hadn't seen in days. She stood, walked over, and hugged Clara tightly. "Your father would be so proud," she whispered. Clara clung to her and burst into tears. I stayed frozen, back turned, fingernails digging into the edge of the old wooden chair. Once, I thought I'd be the one to walk her onto campus, buy her first laptop, teach her how to live alone. Once, I dreamed she'd proudly tell her friends, "My brother's an engineer. He's why I believe in myself." But now, in her dreams, I was no longer in the picture. When they left the room, I quietly picked up the acceptance letter left on the table. I read it like a stranger. My chest tightened, part pride, part sorrow, part bitter truth. And I asked myself, how much of her success had my shadow in it? The answer was none. I remembered when Clara was 12. Every time I came home, I brought books, told her stories about technology, promised to show her a lab someday. I once was the little light in her childhood, and that light me, I had extinguished myself, left her to grow up in silence, through scarcity, without guidance. That night, I stepped quietly out to the back porch, looked up at the sky. Mist hung in the air, and inside me was a void no apology could ever fill. I understood. Some lives rise not because of us, but in spite of us. In this old house, the chairs still wait, but I couldn't bring myself to sit. I woke up before anyone else. Maybe it was the habit from years on the streets, where every creak, every whisper was a signal to move. I walked into the kitchen. Morning light angled through the window. laying a thin layer of dust across the wooden table. The old round table, the one we used for breakfast, was still there. 4 chairs, one for each of us. Dad always sat at the head, closest to the salt. Mom on the left, peeling fruit as she ate. Clara beside me back when I used to sit there. I looked at my old chair, still there, unchanged. Even had a faint scratch along the backrest where I used to lean too hard. I stepped closer, placed a hand on it. My fingers trembled not from cold, but hesitation. It was just a chair, just wood and fabric. So why was it so hard to sit down? I didn't, because I feared if I sat there, I might start believing I still belonged, might forget the years I'd been gone, might pretend nothing broke, and I wasn't sure I had that right anymore. They had lost someone. Dad was gone. Mom was sick. Clara was on her way to college. They were still moving forward with or without me. And I was just a shadow passing through, a ghost too scared to sit in his own seat. I stepped back, then turned around and climbed the stairs, leaving the chair behind, still empty, still waiting. But I couldn't bear to sit in it. Showing up isn't enough. You have to be there when they need you. I left early in the morning. Before anyone woke up, no one saw me off. No one stopped me. And I left no note behind. Just a worn backpack over my shoulder and silence clinging to my chest like a second skin. I should have stayed to care for Mom, to cheer Clara on as she prepared for college, to reclaim the role I once abandoned. But I couldn't, not because I didn't want to, but because I knew my presence only stirred discomfort. Meals felt fractured. No one met my eyes for long. The silence deepened whenever I entered a room. I couldn't bear it, couldn't stand being an emotional burden in the very house that once raised me. Yes, I came back, but I hadn't truly returned, because returning isn't just showing up. It's being there when it matters. And I had been absent for far too long. The chair remained, but I never sat. My mother lived, but I didn't stay. My sister still called me brother, but I didn't have the courage to answer with love. I once believed that coming back would be enough, but it wasn't. Sometimes, arriving late makes the wound even deeper. On the bus back to the city, I didn't look out the window, didn't notice the trees or the road. All I saw was a man disappearing quietly, like a ghost no one asked to leave. I had returned, then vanished again. Not because anyone pushed me out, but because I couldn't stay. No one pushed me away. I left because I couldn't accept their love. A few days after leaving, I received a letter from Clara. The envelope was thin, her handwriting still careful like the Christmas cards she used to write as a kid. I opened it, hands trembling, not out of fear of blame, but because I was afraid of facing something worse than anger, compassion. She wrote, "I know you couldn't stay. I understand, but I still need you. So does Mom. You don't have to do much. Just being around, that's enough. Just that. No resentment, no mention of the past. Just a quiet invitation. Soft, gentle, but piercing. I folded the letter, didn't read it twice, didn't write back, not because I wasn't moved, but because I didn't feel worthy. I believed that if I returned, I'd only ruin the fragile peace they'd rebuilt. I made the choice to leave once, and I had to accept that some doors, though still open, are no longer mine to enter. Word came from a neighbor. My mother's message: "Come back if you're tired. The light is still on." I heard those words and felt like something twisted inside me broke. But I turned away anyway, because I feared that if I crossed that threshold again, I'd fall apart and take everyone with me. No one pushed me away. No one turned their back on me. On the contrary, they reached out, even when I'd done nothing to deserve it. And maybe that's why I couldn't accept it. Because love, when held in undeserving hands, can hurt the one who gave it. So I curled inward like a wounded animal. No protests, no screams, just a quiet retreat into shadow. Not because the world was cold, but because I no longer believed I was worthy of warmth. Between wanting to disappear and feeling obligated to stay a man breaking night after night, I don't remember how long I stood on that overpass. Just the cold wind, the black water below, and the rush of cars beneath my feet, all moving like I didn't exist. One side was open space, the other a rusted railing. I laid my hands on the metal edge, not exactly to jump, but not entirely against it either. It's a strange state when you no longer know who you are or why you're anywhere at all. I just stood there, like a forgotten object between the rhythms of a city that had long stopped noticing. No one paused. No one recognized me as someone who once had potential. And truth be told, neither did I. I didn't cry, didn't scream, didn't call for help. Just one whisper echoed in my head. What if I just stop? Stop thinking. Stop holding on. Stop bothering anyone. Stop existing. But then, images broke through. My mother, frail and quiet, wiping down the kitchen table. Clara, studying late at night, a warm lamp casting gold on her notebook. And her letter: "You don't need to do much. Just be nearby." I collapsed. Not from despair, but because I couldn't let go. I had once believed that if I disappeared, they'd suffer less. But I forgot. The greatest pain isn't absence. It's being denied the chance to forgive. I sank to the ground, back against the railing. Wind cut through my torn jacket. Dust caked my face. Beneath me, life kept moving, and I lay in a hollow space no one could see. I didn't end my life that night, but I didn't start living again either. I was just a breathing body, with a heart breaking quietly each night, under the weight of two words: I owe.
I don't know exactly where my father stood that night or what he intended to do. All I know is he didn't do it. Maybe he was just too tired. Maybe he remembered that his mother was sick, that his youngest sister had just gotten into college. No one knows how he survived the days that followed. Only this: he didn't end his life, even though he had no will left to live it. I believe this with all my heart. There's a kind of love, small, quiet, barely spoken, that can keep someone from falling off the edge. Not through persuasion, but through presence. Maybe he couldn't stay with the family, but what kept him from leaving this world was knowing that someone still called him brother, that there was still a small home. with a voice that once said, "Come back, son, the light's still on." Hello everyone, I'm Lily, the youngest daughter of Victor Dominic. My father shared these stories, not to be remembered, but to remind us. Everyone deserves a new beginning, even the broken ones. Some names and places have been changed for privacy, but Free Your Soul is real, and it's the most precious legacy he left us. Today, I'm sharing it with you, hoping it reaches someone who needs a quiet, gentle whisper. Thank you for listening with your heart. I'll see you in the next stories.